Well, this particular out of bounds moon cycle that began on Saturday and lasts until the 25th, so Thursday of this week, has been an adventure so far, because on Friday night, the water pump that pressurizes up the water system in our house, because I'm on a well here, decided, that's it. I'm giving up. And so I spent the most of the weekend in the process of replacing that water pump. It was a unique experience, and the moon, out of bounds. Moon is water, essential water, that Cancerian flavor. And the sun, shifted on the very same day, Saturday, into Aquarius. And I kind of go, how does this water bearer fit into this particular scenario? It's an air sign, and a lot of people get confused about that. A name like Aquarius, it sounds kind of wet. Well, the water bearer actually is it's the energy of taking, an evaporating moisture and lifting it up into a zone where it can be actually manipulated and worked in different fashion than just the water cycle perspective. Aquarius is an air sign. We live in our heads a lot. The thinking processes are, those brain follicles are working overtime. Anyway, this moon out of bounds, which today, I got up yesterday, Monday, a moon day, and it was like, I was still a little, let's say, exhausted from spending a lot of hours over the weekend in getting the water system up and running efficiently and effectively so that we would have water in the house. And yesterday's out of bound moon and me, we were just kind of saying, I need a break. I've been doing these celestial chatters in video form since, I think, sometime in 2021, and in written form prior to that since, I think, back in 2018. So 52 weeks a year, I sit down and consider who in the planetary pantheon is talking to who, and what might they be saying that could be relevant to us humans here on Earth. I know there are, various schools of thought that say, why should I be affected by those planets way out there in space? The irony. I never know exactly what I'm going to say when I sit down. I have some, crib notes, which are basically look like chicken scratches going across the page. This is a monthly look. I'm looking at the month of January. And you can kind of see I've highlighted a few things in yellow. That's what I'm looking at when I sit down to do the weekly celestial chatter. And I notice that we'll start right out with that moon being out of bounds. On today, Tuesday, the primary day in New Hampshire. Well, let's go to the chart. Okay, chart, there you are. Just like that. And moon, this is Monday, we'll go to Tuesday. The moon is in Cancer. Cancer is family. Remember, moon is still out of balance. It's also our connection to our clan. And the moon can represent the emotions. So here on this political primary day, emotions are out of bounds. That moon is out of bounds. You know, there's a wildness in the air, a certain unpredictability that is in play that have to kind of go, maybe a vulnerability or an awkwardness in how do I want to vote? Well, I don't live in New Hampshire, so I don't have to want to vote, but just observing what the heck's going to happen today. I mean, over the weekend, the GOP clan leaders potentially are down just to two, Trump and the other lady, Hensley or something like that. Anyway, in the air today, as people are essentially going to the polls there and voting, putting down their Hancock in, both the political Democratic as well as Republican versions of that ticket. The question will be, how do I feel about, a lot of things? How do I feel about this person being at the helm? Or how do I feel about the way the economy is? Or, how do I feel about, what is considered acceptable for the control factors of how my version of living is going to be affected by this political dance. And because of that, who might I feel more or less comfortable having the position of the helm? And the government is an enormous body. And the person at the so-called helm, the president, or any other position along that whole entire field, really is only relevant at a group level. The group is deciding what is going to transpire. It isn't an individual thing. Yeah, we're all individuals and we all have a say, theoretically, in what it is that's going to transpire through this election process of 2024. I really am more inclined to push for the idea of one person, one vote, as opposed to the electorate, who essentially can be manipulated and has been through the years. When a candidate in any particular state gets the majority of the votes for that state at the electorate level, the whole entire electorate of that state goes to that particular candidate. Whereas, I don't know that really represents the version of one person, one vote that actually is transpiring in this country. I don't want to get all into that political thing. So today, also, the people, Venus, how we interact with one another, shifted from Sagittarius into Capricorn. is it possible? Is it conceivable that how we interact with one another, Venus entering Capricorn, at the potential political level is something that we need to pay closer attention to? You know, the ramifications or there's colliding thoughts within my head, probably are more of a reflection of the so-called differences of opinion that exist within each of us and within groups of us that collide with one another over what? Over perspectives that we have been trained into that may or may not have their bearings on a level of connection that all of us as human beings, when we incarnated here in this earth dance, are supposed to be able to exchange with one another in the adventure of living and discovering how is it that we can work together. Not so much how is it that we can see the differences within one another and rail against one another in things like, oh, maybe something like war. I want the resources that you have in your country. I'm willing to go and kill you for it. Yeah, that is not exactly the idea of equitable sharing, that as soul beings, we came to discover how to facilitate while in this earth dance. And the moon going through its home port of Cancer, out of bounds until the 25th, which is Thursday, is in play. Our feelings, perhaps a little closer to the surface. Whatever the results are of this primary today, we must remember to breathe. The media, often stimulated through political push me, pull you kind of energy, stirs things up. And, moon's out of bounds. Those feelings closer to the surface, Am I? Are there any of the me's that are out there able to be tripped up, slipped across an imaginary borderline where I have to do something, I need to make a statement. And depending on how hinged or unhinged they are, I think there's, even though it's a very small percentage in modern society that wanders around in that unhinged fashion, they really can stir things up with their spontaneous, or perhaps at least thought out for a while, eruptions into a presentation that represents that unhingedness. And using the tools at their avail, try to disrupt life in whatever fashion seems appropriate to them. I would keep my finger on the pulse of this particular week and the political things going on to say, I need to breathe. There will be things that are going to come up, and some of us will be more affected than others. As we go through the week, the thing that I've been observing is this Mercury-Mars traveling close together with each other. We get to Thursday here, we have a full moon transpiring. The full moon experience is a moment when that maximum reflected solar light asks us. Now, we've been working on things. The full moon is when we theoretically reach a maturation part of the process. The ideas that we initiated at the new moon, are they coming into culmination? This is one of the options. In this whole process, we've learned to grow something that we birthed at that new moon. And we have to ask ourselves, is there, a new way that this birthing process might have unfolded? Or are we just going to redo the things that we've done before? Your choice in how you play this. But this full moon, let's see. What does the Sabian symbols have to say about this full moon, which happens at 5 degrees of Leo? Now, I have to remind myself and yourselves, the Sabian symbols, which were put together back in, I think, 1915-ish, 1918 maybe, were when an astrologer and a psychic went to Balboa Park down in San Diego with 360 blank cards, each of which had in the upper corner one of the 362 degrees of the zodiac written on it on the backside of the card, so that neither the astrologer nor the psychic were aware of visually seeing what that was. And they shuffled the deck and then proceeded one at a time to pull up one card, and the psychic, Elsie Wheeler was her name, got a vision, which was written on the front side of the card by Mark Evan Jones, the astrologer. And they proceeded, it took them all day, and they went through all 360 cards and wrote out the vision that each card had from Elsie Wheeler. Mark took the cards home after that, put them in order, and then basically, got a version of how each particular card sign could be used in a divination process to consider anything that touched excuse me that particular degree. And that's where this particular version of the Sabian symbols came into birth. Dane Ruger, one of the, shall we call him a modern astrologer from back in the early 1900s as well, went to Mark, who was his friend, and said, can I play with these, Mark? Mark said, hey, these are downloaded from the ethers. Absolutely. So Dane Ruger put them together into a book called An Astrological Mandala. You can kind of see my book's a little bit beaten up. This is my third copy of the book. I've been using the Sabian symbols forever. I started into astrology in 1969. I think I went through my first book in the 70s, maybe into the 80s, when somehow it just seems to have walked away out of my library into somebody else's possession. And I got another one, and who knows when that one disappeared. I'm on my third copy right now. A divination is something that either you do or you don't tune into. I could actually say that if you consider the energies at play when we're talking about, a full moon right now, how is the larger perspective of efficiency being expressed through what it was that began as an intention for this particular cycle that we're in. So we look at the Sabian symbol and say, what does the Sabian symbol have to offer from an energetic perspective? That's how Sabian symbols work. And whether it lights something up for you or not, this is your own call. The Sabian symbol for this particular full moon in Leo, action. There's a expressive thing that wants to get out there. That's Leo, driven by that sun, The Sabian symbol reads, a conservative, old-fashioned lady is confronted by a hippie girl. And the keynote, the need to transcend our subservience to fashion in morals as well as clothes. And further considerations. This refers to the ever-changing pageant of social values as ideals of human relationship succeed one another, one generation facing in the next the antithetic picture of what it has been brought up to consider worthwhile and decent. The confrontation may lead to great bitterness, yet it should show us the impermanence of most of what society impresses upon our collective mentality. Here we are dealing now with cultural values and the emotional impact they have upon our character formation. Whereas the first degree of Leo dealt with an individual crisis of reorientation, the sixth degree, actually it really is 5 degrees, refers to a collective, cultural, and social crisis which challenges us to realize the relativity of social values. That first degree of Leo, I'll read you the Sabian symbol since we're considering it in the mix. Blood rushes to a man's head as his vital energies are mobilized under the spur of ambition. There's some ponderable thoughts to take into consideration as Thursday rolls around and we have that full lunar light shining down upon us. The moon has come back in bound, so perhaps the wildness that has been in play from the 20th through the 25th is not going to be quite as relevant. You know, the ramifications of what may have been spawned, shall we say, during that out of bound cycle. Yeah, it's likely we still might have to deal with that. Now, what does Friday have in store for us? See how Mercury is basically about a half a degree away from Mars. But on this day, Uranus, the last of the retrograde planets, stations, no longer going in reverse. Uranus, it has an energy that inclines us to, when it is in play for us, which doesn't necessarily mean all the time, is the shake, rattle, and roll, of, earthquake kind of energy, intended to put us off kilter in some fashion. We as human beings can become comfortable with the way things are moving. And Uranus's function in any of that play scenario is to create something suddenly to go, wait a second, that doesn't fit into the comfort zone of what I believed was what I'm living by. And, why does Uranus do this? Because Uranus is also known as the Great Awakener. To keep us from falling asleep within that comfort zone, periodically the requirement is for some shaking to take place. We scurrying around in our, ways here on the surface of this planet often forget that the planet is alive. And periodically it needs to, stretch and move its essence in some fashion, which we experience as earthquakes and volcanoes. Things that we have no control over. It is a reminder to wake up. We don't really have the control over what is taking place with the planet at the level of the planet. Oh, on the surface, we think we're so much in control of so many things, so many parts to glom onto and manipulate, and, and the earthquake comes. And buildings are reduced to rubble. Lives are lost. And the call comes. Wake up. Might there be aspects of how you are living that need to be refreshed? Are there interchange capacities that require us to engage with one another at a heart level, not just the mind? Feel the essence of one another. Saturday, actually it's Saturday and Sunday, Mars and Mercury are at the same degree of Capricorn. Capricorn, remember, we've talked about it being the realm of the whole, trying to facilitate the best way to utilize that energy by rules, regulations, versions of where on the mountain of awareness our quest lies. Mercury, how we communicate, and Mars, a driven energy. Words erupting. That's a good way to see this particular conjunction taking place in the field of the rules and the regulations, the political, perhaps. And what might the Sabian symbol divine our consideration toward at this 17th, which is actually the 18th degree of Capricorn? You're going to like this one. The Union Jack flag flies from a British warship, Mars, the warrior planet. The keynote, the protection afforded to individuals and groups by powerful institutions in charge of maintaining order. Further consideration. This symbol reflects conditions prevailing in the past, when Great Britain's fleet was policing the seas under the international principle of the freedom of the seas. Times have changed, but the concept remains valid. Power is required to maintain social order and relatively peaceful interpersonal as well as international relationships. Alas, this power can easily be misused under the pretext of preserving law and order. Justice and compassion must balance social power, and especially the power of privileged groups. Where this symbol appears, the need for protection may be in evidence, or it may be a warning against using power for selfish advantage. it brings to us a realization of the ambivalence of political power, its value, and its dangers. One thing I haven't really gotten into is the shift of the Sun and Pluto into Aquarius. It happened over last weekend. The Plutonic intensity it's not something to be lighthearted about, because the dredging quality that Pluto represents it has an intention to expose things that have been hidden from us. And, there's been a lot of astrological consideration and talk about this shift of Pluto into Aquarius. Well, Pluto, it takes a long time for Pluto to go through a sign. So, essentially we're beginning a 20-year cycle wherein Pluto is actually going to be in Aquarius, just going up to about 2 degrees of Aquarius, and then it's going to go backward. By the beginning of September, we'll shift back into Capricorn for one last little, Capricornian thing until mid-November, when it'll shift into Aquarius full time for the next, 19, 20 years. The play, or the consternation, shall we call it, of how this Plutonic energy is going to unfold, I think we need to breathe into and not get too uppity about it. We have 20 years of this process ahead of us to glean the most appropriate way to facilitate, from an Aquarius perspective, how we as active and moving groups of people can work through effectively those deeper hidden perspectives that have always been in play and always will be within any group matrix, that while underlying our chosen directions, are going to expose us to factors that are not always going to be comfortable. The process of how we get along with one another when we're in that group format are something for the next 20 years should be reviewed consistently. When we come out of this 20-year cycle of Pluto going to Aquarius, we will have been exposed to options of what it can really mean for group energy to actually represent the group. And with any luck, from the Aquarian humanitarian side of the equation, we might be able to more effectively see the exchange and blend of different group energies coming together to compare notes so that the actual group format will be allowed to expand. We're all a part, as humans, of the human family. Yeah, we have different perspectives. But in that, are we willing to listen to one another? To allow our perspectives to alter efficiently with one another, that we might grow personally and as a family of man, where we're not at each other's throats all the time? Oh, what a thought. Is it possible? I believe so. Pluto going to Aquarius is going to be asking this question consistently and saying, oh, by the way, when you considered doing what it is that you're doing, how broad a paintbrush were you using, and how inclusive of others is that going to work? 28th January, that is my birthday. I will be turning, I'm actually at the midpoint of the third trimester of life, if you consider life to be about 90 years. That's all I have for this week. Like the image behind me, may the balloon ride of your adventure in this life cycle that you are upon go as smoothly, as well as experientially challenging as is required for your souls to grow. This is why we decided to incarnate in this earth dance. That's all I've got for this week. See y'all next week.